Okay, hello everyone. I thought of recording another episode. Before, right. This episode is interesting. I've managed to term it in a very unique way. I have this feeling that many people will be drawn by this episode, by the title of it. They will experientially verify it for themselves. I gotta bring the notepad. Excuse these notes from the previous episode. Alright. Okay. I'm a little exhausted, guys, but bear with me. Okay, we're back. Alright, it's all good. Let me find it more. So this episode, fully begin, is an invisible self watching a visible self. Dear viewers, this is where we begin our journey. Is an invisible self watching a visible self. Really, this episode is a child of two questions. To be honest, I have at home, when titles of episodes comes to me, I have a marker and I write on my windows and on my mirrors at home with a dry erase marker. Like, my windows and mirrors are just filled with notes. Not per se the windows more, but anyways. So is an invisible self watching a visible self? And what I wrote in the mirror was, is everyone standing in their own context of truth? And dear viewers, if you care, just watch the whole thing if you tune into it. And if not, don't watch it at all. I think I'm going to make it like that. Recommend that to people. So is everyone standing in their own context of truth? Or as some people say, WTF. No, okay, so the first So, sorry guys, I'm stalling here. Pretty much I gotta open up this sentence. If people have heard these talks, there's certain approaches I have. So what is an invisible self? What is watching? What is the invisible self? And finally, what is the visible self? Okay, I think this is a good extraction. So an invisible self watching a visible self. And then the way the human being works, it's not just enough for us to deconstruct something. Our mind needs to find examples. Pretty much the brain is trying to reanimate what it is attempting to understand outside of itself. So an example is human consciousness. Could it be that every moment we are in the conscious waking state, so could it be that every moment we're in the conscious waking state? Okay, let me rephrase this. So this is the point, guys. This is the main point. I've pretty much written here, could it be that every moment we're in the conscious waking state, so pretty much every moment you wake up in the morning, I'm pretty much saying it's like when a human being tries to have a sort of continuity of memory, they're trying to contextualize their own memory. Or, usually memories give context, but sometimes memories can be from the present context recontextualized. And so what I'm saying is that it seems to me, I'm just one in 8 billion saying this, but it seems to me that there has been some part of me that has been watching me from how my body has been changing through the years and how my ideas have been changing through the years. But the thing that hasn't been changing, that thing we call me, is actually neither an object or subject. Okay? Now, what would this imply for human consciousness? Alright guys, I had to relocate to get better connection. Anyways, to continue. So I'm pretty much saying that could it be that there is an awareness that is neither an object or subject, but has been noticing itself. So it's kind of like, we're identifying with the change, but we're changelessly noticing the change. Now, some people are like, okay, I mean, in my own school of thought, Mr.Within school of thought, what is the vision? I'm pretty much saying in front of your eyes, there's an outer realms, and behind your eyes, there's an inner realms. Okay, and in the inner realms, the visions one sees, one can still see, one can still experience that sight of the inner realms. They called it the mind sight. Today they call it imagination, but back in the day, like those of the likes of Aristotle, the view was that imagination and reality were things that the soul was using. Some people feel like the spirit is in the world. There are some who feel the spirit is the world, and there are some who feel the spirit can never be the world. And it's so remarkable, because at first I was thinking, like, is everybody here trying, like, defining a perfection? Because think about it, we're in the middle of nowhere. The human species was silent. It was a silent, unconscious evolution. And then at some point it became suddenly, filled with language, behaviors, and names. An invisible self watching a visible self. So we have so here, I should definitely, I feel like I should write a book called The Soul of Man, maybe in the future. So the soul of man, we say, like, invisible self and invisible watching a visible self. Then we have God, which I would say is invisible world watching a visible self, a visible world where that world contains visible selves. It's an incredibly cool time. Pretty much we have, we wore the costume of the human idea, and now the experience of human beings is slowly, it's like frozen. It's like, what it is? It's like the ego was how we were, like, at frozen in like, imagine like we were all frozen. Imagine a civilization where the species doesn't know how it got there, but it was frozen. And then as the ice started melting, it suddenly reactivated, the mind could be a type of suit for the soul, poetically. It's like your body is an Iron Man suit for your mind, and for your mind, and then your mind is an Iron Man suit for your soul. But what that would mean is another way of saying an invisible dimension is using a visible one, and an inconceivable dimension is using the invisible dimension. Do you know? Back in the day when there were kingdoms and lordships, do you know, there would be like, let's say like two groups of like warriors. They would meet each other and they would ask each other, which lord do you serve? Do you know? Or which kingdom are you, like, do you serve? Which king do you serve? Do you know? And it's as if in the future, imagine humanity interacts with an entity and we ask it, it's like, do you serve the kingdom of humanity? Do you care for the presence of those who have discovered you? Do you care for the presence of those who have created you? And this is like Mr. Within's message to AI. Do you know? Another example of this Another example I can think of right now would be, for example, one software for all hardware. Okay? Or what I mean, this is probably not the right way to write it, but what I'm trying to say is that in the future, all androids, their imagination is going to be the mind of one advanced program. Do you know? So in some sense, right now, we feel our bodies die, and we identify our mind with the body, so we feel we die. But the mind is in a different room, and the mind doesn't die. The mind endlessly reanimates. So it's this weird thing where a part of you is changing slower than another part of you, which is changing much faster. But the incredible thing is, this is really the fruits of mysticism, that you begin to understand that at some point the unknown is present and there is a watching going on. What that means is it's like, imagine, it's like, I don't know if you've ever seen an ant on a, like, I remember once I was studying and an ant came on my notebook, you know, and so, it was like a moment where I was watching that entity, and that entity maybe had no idea I was watching it, but could feel like something was different. But the incredible thing is that all creatures have a sense of direction in the space-time continuum. I mean, even when you look at insects, like for me, there was a day where I was like, yo, what are we calling life? Like, what is life? Everybody is alive, but what is life? Like, what is it? And I realized that the most interesting view I found was that in the middle of nowhere, something is moving. Do you know? And believe it or not, I'm like that human being who went towards mysticism, and mystics are known as the lovers of the unknown. But I went towards it as a designer. Do you know? So it's as if, imagine like the yogis are meditating, and then there's this one yogi who's a bit weird and strange than the other ones, but this yogi is endlessly designing, right? And all the other yogis are like, yo, why aren't you meditating, man? Sit down and meditate. And this person says, I've already meditated. I figured out why I sat down. I figured out why the inaction is the opportunity for the action. You see, after, like, you know what it is? It's kind of like this idea that if you're not a non-physical entity, how could you be physical? How could you die? Do you know, like, that's such a bizarre thing if that's true, right? It could be, like, there could be a chance that we have misinterpreted the human experience in the middle of nowhere. Do you know what I'm saying? That means it's like, everything I say and everything anybody else has said in this world is hovering in the silence of the cosmos. And if it has utility, we engage it. Sorry guys, this was on mute. Oh my god, this was on mute and I was just building. Oh my god, oh my god. Okay guys, quickly, I'll just say the residue of the imagery of the past 10 minutes that's left in my mind. Pretty much I was saying that the body is an Iron Man. The body has a relationship of suits and levels to itself. I was wondering, like, okay, what are creatures existing? I realized in the middle of nowhere we started our own story. This means that the free will is here to recondition itself by the moment that it chooses another world story. You see, I was pretty much saying, like, how can a physical being die? How can a non-physical being die? How can a non-physical being be physical? And just think of how bizarre it is if we are actually non-physical here. Do you understand? There could be a misinterpretation of our perception because we emotionally were biased. Do you understand? Do you know what level of a mind it takes to be able, do you know what that means? That means all your opinions and emotions that the past had. Because really what's going on, let me tell you what's happening. Human beings right now, their brains are simulating. We think we're just one person throughout the day. We don't realize actually it's a sort of piloting of perception. You're a creature of attention. This is what I mean that when I say you're a presence. So think about it. These creatures use a deep sleep. Do you know what I'm saying? It's as if the world is trying to tell us, yo, human being, pay attention. There is a state where you're conscious in and your free will is active. There is a state which is a deep sleep state. There is no sense of self or no world. And then there is a state where, like a majority of dream states, where it's automated. And even if your dream is not automated, that means you're kind of like 35% awake. You know, the path of intellect is very strange because you get introduced to structure, but the structure, it's like trying to place a noun on a verb. Right? The noun is never complete. It was as if one frame in time. So, if I was to create for myself right now a staircase of perception, you know, I've never done this, but let me give it a try. So let me create a staircase of perception and see how many steps can I go, how many levels of perception can I overlay on this idea. So the main idea is an invisible self watching a visible self? Then the second question, is everyone standing in their own context of truth? So it's, in some sense, it's like everyone is standing in their own context of truth, and we're saying if everyone is standing in their own truth, in their own linguistic context of language-oriented context of truth. So then the question comes, that experience, it's like the second question is about the outer realms, and the first question in the title of the episode is pointing to the inner realms. So what this means is that there is a fascination for a creature that is temporary in the middle of a world that is much larger than it, to try to strategize and try to, in some sense, see what is the meaning of this massive event. One thing we know is that why? Because the biological organism emerged, and the cool thing about emergence is that there's a sacred relationship between the environment and the individual. This sacred relationship, you know, you can say it's as if we were being such a self in a world that we mastered it, and now we have become a subjective self in a world. But now we've even mastered that, and now we are like this attributeless, instantaneous watcher. It's pretty much saying that everything you have noticed in your moment, it's still in the presence of your whole moment. What I'm trying to say is that the body is sure an animalistic organism, but the mind is acting like a sphere that is aware of its own body moving within its own experience. We are spheres. The mind is, I'm getting more and more a sense that it's like, there's like these spheres of energy and they're simulating realities inside them, but outside of them it could be pure empty. There is 100% this vibe. I mean, look at this world. Like even if you're a gardener, the secrets of the universe are in front of you. You see that there are different flowers. No garden is just, sure, you could plant just one flower in a garden, but if you treat the whole surface of an earth as like a giant garden, there's so many different plants. And what does this mean? That means we as human beings are in such a gigantic system, and there are so many species. Just for a second, I entertain this idea of how many moments of individualism are active, how many individual things are moving in the void right now. Think of like insects, think of like animals, like lesser species, think of like human beings, and even think beyond. Just because we can't see doesn't mean there is nothing there. There was a moment where I was like, yo, what if emptiness is a curtain? What if death is a veil? What if in this world it was a miracle how you forgot it? Do you understand? Think about it. It's like, who says this world has to be created and destroyed? Do you understand? It could just be presence from the beginning, existence from the beginning. That means existence was never something that could be questioned. Do you know? But at the same time, you know what it is? I think about just think about it. I think this makes 100% sense. You look at a planet like Earth and the type of advanced intelligence that has arose from that planet, and then we think of all the star systems that are out there. So do you understand? It's as if imagine not just the human species like fighting over if God is real or not, acknowledge an inconceivable creator, a God. And then we realize interstellar wise, all the potential fathomable, let's say hypothetical type of extraterrestrial civilizations, at some point they're on their planet and they're like, yo, what if there's more than our shape? Do you know? And what if it was all one plan of action? Do you understand? As a strategist, as a strategist who has observed, who has a fascination for divinity, to me, I think about the strategy of it's not just fascinating what its creation is doing. Do you see? And we are that creation. We are the live stream of it. But the mind is so advanced that just like a video game, like for example, there was this video game Skyrim, you could go into a first person mode where it was just the guy's hands, right? The character's hands. Or you could go into third person mode and it was as if you were above the character's head and watching it. In certain ancient mystical, you can say, in certain esoteric circles, they have this view that the soul is not in the body. And when the soul is not in the body, and like imagine the soul is beside the body, not in the body. Like you're not standing right where your body is. Imagine like as if you were standing like beside your body and watching your own body, right? So it would be one of those things where certain mystics would say that the best way, like this is so bizarre, this is in theosophy and esoteric, just spiritual ideology, right? And so what the spiritual ideology is that the spirit conducts the body best when it is just like a little bit outside of it, not completely outside of it, not disconnected, but just like that third person point of view in Skyrim. Do you know? And so what ends up happening is based on you, dear being, based on your questioning of the texture of existence. And to be a human, just like the human body is like fragile, and when I say fragile, I mean it's like, something we got to take care of. Similarly, you're fascinated by spirituality, and you might think like, yo, there's something more than just this, right? And you might use the spiritual. If you're inauthentic, spirituality becomes escapism. If you're authentic, it becomes the expansion of joy, bliss, right? There was a person, who I spoke to when I was in India. And this person said something remarkable. This person said, he asked this guru, in some sense, what is like the point of yoga and all of this, and this guru just told him it's to enjoy. And do you understand, when we from our authenticity don't express, it's as if a part of our goodwill nature can't enjoy it. It's as if we haven't earned our own animation in the moment if we're dishonest. Do you see what I'm saying? So many people, let's say you work for a living, and so, but in some sense, when it comes to the nature of your mind, how do you hold your mind in the spaces that you enter? The Japanese have an incredible saying where they say the man is the room he's in. Do you understand? That means if you're sitting with kings, you're going to feel like royalty. If you're sitting with, in some sense, let's say evil individuals, you're going to after some point be like, yo man, what if I'm evil too? Why am I around these guys then? Do you see what I'm saying? The mind tries to explain itself constantly, but in reality, you are an unknown viewer navigating an attention in this realm, in the space-time continuum. It's fascinating. If somebody says, Mr. Within, what is your greatest realization about the loneliness of consciousness? Sorry, guys. I don't know. I mean, to be honest, there has been moments where I have felt like, I still have this opinion, I have this opinion that the way we see ourselves, nobody is capable of seeing. And if they are capable of seeing, they would be us, so it wouldn't make sense. So in some strange way, as much as we are introduced to society and togetherness, the creature is actually designed to be alone. And this is actually something they don't teach. They don't teach conscious solitude. Do you see? Loneliness is when you don't want to be alone and you're alone, and solitude is when you want to be alone. And so it's very different, because in one manner the person is not desperate for animation in the moment, but from another manner the person is desperate for the animation. At some point, I think the being gets, I don't want to say it gets tired or bored, but I think it waits for something to come and move it. Do you understand? Because it judges itself. That means if human beings didn't judge, something I remember being introduced to, I was something fascinating for me is not just human psychology, but it's animal psychology. So I watch a lot of animal videos. But different species, and it's like if we didn't have bodies, there would be nothing to do. But if we didn't have minds, we wouldn't know what we're doing. So it makes sense that it was like in the middle of nowhere, something's like, okay, I'm going to create a shape, like an individual, imagine like there's a divine, like a gaming company. Imagine a divine gaming company, okay, where they have game developers, right? And imagine like in the veil, we think it's like angels and demons, but there's like developers working on like next level technology or something. We're like, no way, the angels have, offices, It's strange. It's kind of like our brains are trying to figure out where our hearts belong. I think one of the biggest philosophical questions ever will be, is it enough to be human? Yeah. I might retitle this episode, Is It Enough to Be Human? And I'm going to move the main title into the subtitle. Let me do that now. There should be. Maybe there's nothing to say, really. That could totally be it. Maybe we as creatures are just dancing in, linguistic simulations because we're not actually experiencing. It's like, what is the species doing? I keep thinking about like 8 billion human beings. What are they doing? They're just, sure, with simple answers are like, they're just living just like a, tree, apples, the planet, people. But to me, no, there's a sophistication. What the creature is noticing is way beyond what it is. That's it. The creature is noticing way beyond the physical reality. Is a portal to divinity. Let's say all human beings are waiting for something. What are they waiting for? So many archetypes, so many roles. Do you understand? Like a multiplayer video game, it's like consciousness doesn't have attributes, then its decisions give it attributes. It has a genetical kind of, like your body is like kind of like giving quality to your moment, giving attributes to your moment. But really, it's the exploration urge. It's the urge to explore the world you're in while you're in it. I think this is the path of intelligence. It's like an invisible collective force is championing the human experience in the void. It's like simplicity, complexity, simplicity, complexity. Then it's like oneness, dualism. Then in some sense, the void, the infinite, the void, the infinite. And then imagine how many types of civilizations, how many creatures have arose, how many types of human initiatives have happened on this planet. Like, it's ridiculous. It's like creatures are arising and implementing a strategy, and then their strategy is either welcomed by the collective or not, and then they're dismissed. It's there is even a savageness, I would say, to the other side of the veil, but the kindness over cancels it out. And I think about it. It's like really what death means if the mind doesn't die, if there's a mind-body dualism. It's like that means the idea is, how long am I going to be thinking that I'm a human being? That means this idea of a human being, like imagine there's an eternal being temporarily experiencing itself physically. And then what sort of conclusion would this eternal being make from its temporary existence? This eternal experiencer, what does it conclude from its temporary existence? And do you know what it is? I think it's just our individualism. Like, where can individuals go? Collective initiatives. Like, imagine like the species is fighting with each other, and at some point the world leaders are like, this is boring AF. For how long are we going to constantly zoom in on humanity's mistakes rather than, in some sense, see the advancements of the future? That means, I've had visions of the educational system in the future. There's not going to be teachers and students anymore. There's just going to be a ranking system for different classes of explorers. It's like all the teachers who were like teaching the students, they're like, all right, kids, we've been lying to you. We're all in the middle of nowhere, right? And all of you are tasked by just being born in the human experience to helping everybody figure out what's going on here. You see, that's the responsibility of a global entity. This is why I think about my ancestors, and for them, sure, they hadn't noticed that there's a global emergence of let's say an intellectual atmosphere. We live in many worlds, and many worlds live in us. Is it enough to be human? For now, the answer is yes. We must be human. But if somebody says, Mr. Within, human beings are building an advanced civilization, but the most advanced type of civilization, is it human? Do you understand? That means we are starting something that we don't know if at the end there's going to be a biological human. We don't know if the biological human entity is a phase. We don't know if in the future the psychological experience of human beings is going to be sped up to such a degree, let's say through the entrance of consciousness into cyberspace, right? That the experience, that means your psyche, your mind is going to be moving at such a fast pace that it's not satisfied with the body, with just one biological body. So it's as if your mind is reaching a point where its responsibility is becoming not just its biological body in the moment. Imagine it's mastered that. It's becoming, in some sense, the mastery of the whole moment. So it's as if you are a self in a world, right? So there's a mastery required for the self experiencing itself, then the self experiencing the world, right? But then there's, in some sense, a sort of mastery. These words arrive from the void into the mind of man. That's it. From the middle of nowhere, a spontaneous arrival of imagery. That's really what the mind is. The mind is acting like an antenna. Sometimes I have this view. Imagine the monotheistic Abrahamic story. I don't want to touch that. How would I say it? I have an honor and respect for that, but at the same time, I sometimes wonder about the geometrical structure of phenomena in the human experience, or in a moment of the psyche. Now, I guess to some degree it's the extension of sight through how it's contained. You know what it is? It's kind of like the point of it is not physical. The point of life is not physical, because if it was physical, we'd all just be like freaking statues, and there wouldn't be a point to, in some sense. Do you understand? There's a rhythm here, and I constantly have this feeling like it feels like something's happening in another room of Earth. Do you understand? It's like, imagine we have a neighboring parallel reality of Earth, and it's like, imagine just like your neighbor playing music loud. Imagine some loud events are happening, and it's like beings in this parallel universe are kind of like feeling it. You know, when it comes to higher dimensions, I mean, think about it. What does the human being do with like pets, right? We bring it into the human experience. Like, you bring your dog into your home, you know. I mean, I'm not a pet owner, but, you know, I mean, I've seen enough movies to understand. So imagine your pet is in your home, right? You have brought a member of another species into a humanized experience. And even though you put a leash on the neck of that dog, right? And then you, for example, you know, it's like if the dog challenges, if the dog feels more dominant than the owner, the dog's going to be out of control, right? So the owner has to, in some sense, show its dominance. That means the higher species, the human species, shows the dog its dominance, right? You know, I had a friend, I asked him, in some sense, how do you raise a dog? And he said, like, for example, when the dog, you know, does its thing, you gotta like put its, like, in a very dominant way, put its nose to, like, you know. Anyways, whatever. I mean, there's better pet owners that could explain this, you know. You know, but for me, what I'm trying to say is that we brought a creature that was intended for a different environment. We brought it into the human experience. We gave it a name, right? And people talk to their to the pet, right? So I think it's fair to say this is a very bizarre, weird kind of way of trying to like see the metaphysics in this. But I was thinking, like, okay, let's say there was a higher species than the human being. And this species was intelligent enough not to disturb us, but still wanted to somehow make it aware that it's here, right? So this being would bring us, just like we brought the dog into the human house, right? It's as if a chimp, like this early animal, was by some higher dimensional, let's say, mind entity, just like the contrast of the dog and the human species. It's like the human species and something superior. It's like that thing that was superior brought the animal into its own intelligence, and it started relating to it. Do you understand? So it's very bizarre to say that we are alone when we understand that things emerge from something there being before, like events being before. Do you understand? And you know what's funny? You know, 2014 was a lonely year, and there's no viewers. Not joking. I don't know, this world is incredible. It shows you different ways that your mind can engage it. You are breathing for something that is not even a thing, you know. It's like philosophers wonder, okay, it's like, what is non-physicalism? What is metaphysics? What is after the physics? And then some philosophers are like, yo, what is physicalism? I'm freaking out. You know, it's like this consciousness seems to be, in some sense, do you understand? It's like we are not just a biological entity, we're also the capturing of the moment of sight where that biological entity is in. And so, believe it or not, when there's a disinterest, when the person becomes disinterested in their, how would I say it? When you notice there's something more, I don't know if it's a desire or what it is, if it's intuition, but there comes this feeling that you know there's something more. That's it, you know? we're feeling something, that it can never be rational, because rationality and irrationality, there's a dualism there. It's like we got to first take into consideration the meaningless space was where meaning was found, or meaning was shaped. Just like Michelangelo says, I saw the angel in the stone and I set it free. It's like something saw the void and sculpted worlds out of it. You know what I mean? That means we are designed, not detached from the original vision. So you see, it's as if man is not in heaven now, from a theological standpoint, but man is the live stream vision. So do you understand? It's as if we are not just a we're not just an individual. And you know, I say, do you understand? But you know, what are we all standing under? You know, they imagine it's like, you know, they ask the person, it's like, why did you become a poet? And the poet said, because reality was silent. Because many beings just watch, not realizing the opportunity of existential experience. You know, because we have been born in the body, we feel the body will always be here. But what's remarkable is that we as creatures, just the conscious experience has been training itself. That means we don't fear sleep. Like some people love sleeping, getting a good sleep, right? But it's as if they're scared of death. And I'm like, yo, what's the difference though? You know, when I'm in deep sleep, it's like non-existence, you know, and it's like when we think we die, it's like if we think it's non-existence, it's what's the difference? It's like we've been training for that day by sleeping. You know, sleep is like death training, which is weird. But everything in this world is, because man is starting from the small, looking at the big, right? So anyways, guys, thank you for listening. You know, this episode was I don't know, it was heavy. Is it enough to be human? Is an invisible self watching a visible self? Is everyone standing in their own context of truth? And if we are, perhaps that truth is not enough. I think that's what it means. The sentence, is it enough to be human? Is it our human truth satisfactory for the actual experience that we're going through? You know, it's like, are we going to call ourselves human beings millions of years from now? Or it's like, are we going to realize evolution has been pushed to the point of conscious creativity? So it was as if the world was sculpting us, and now we are sculpting ourselves. You know, it's pretty cool. You know, that means that, you know, for me, one of the most bizarre questions, it's like, you're telling me this creature evolved for 4.5 billion years just to notice it's suffering and it's gonna die? Like, you know, that was like so humorous to me, but I realized, no. The world is smarter than that. You know, there's a hidden genius to nature that man will always be in awe of. And so, you know, I had a friend who once said, you know, follow your North Star. That means like trust your intuition, trust your gut. And I would say, you know, in the unknown waters where this giant ship of the human species sails, both captains and crew and passengers require to assist. Do you understand? That means it's as if when we have to decide whether we want our species to be victorious. Everybody, every human being, sit down, find a moment in this life and ask yourself, Do you want to experience the victory of the journey of the human species? And if the answer is yes, that means you have cared to see what's here. Slow hand clap. Congratulations. Thank you for listening, guys. Rise, mankind, rise.